Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
No, it doesn't bother me at all. In fact, I think just let the Democrats keep going with this. I think it's fabulous. You know, their new mascot, becoming a porn star, walking a runway in a G-string with a bunch of dollar bills stuffed into it. What could be a better modern-day mascot for the Democrat Party than Stormy Daniels, barely wearing anything with dollar bills stuffed into it while prancing around a bunch of drunk guys next to a pole in a place like the Bada Bing? If that's not the perfect new mascot image for the Democrat Party, let them own it. Greetings, my friends. It's great to have you here, back after a long two-day absence known as a weekend. We are ready to kick off yet another week of broadcast excellence. 800-282-2882. If you want to be on the program, the email address lrushbo@eibnet.us. Proving my point. It used to be Russian collusion, nothing there. It used to be collusion, nothing there. Now they're on to Stormy Daniels. They can't get rid of it. Stormy Daniels, in a cameo appearance on Saturday Night Live, actually made an AP News story. You wonder why Don Blankenship is surging in West Virginia. The drive-by media explains all of this. I mean, this is comical. It makes an AP News story. So Stormy Daniels shows up as herself on Saturday Night Live. We got Alec Baldwin portraying Trump. And he asked her, what would it take to make you go away? What would it take to get you out of here? And she says, your resignation. And that makes an AP News story, a comedy bit on Saturday Night Live. So they have all of their eggs wrapped up in this porn star now. Stormy Daniels is the new mascot of the Democrat Party, and they seem to be eagerly embracing it. So I say, let them continue. If they really think that's the route to retaking the House and impeaching Donald Trump, let them have at it. I want to know, the volcano in Hawaii. I wonder if they're going to grant an exemption to Hawaii, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or are they going to fine Hawaii? I mean, you want to talk about the carbon emissions that are happening in this eruption, and you think of the damage to climate that's happening with this eruption of the volcano. What are they going to do to Hawaii? I mean, Hawaii is minding its own business. All of a sudden, the volcano erupts, throwing Hawaii's promises to the United Nations to reduce carbon emissions into total confusion. I also found it ironic. You've seen videos. I mentioned this to Snerdley. His eyes just got big and big. Yeah, I saw it. Have you seen the videos showing lava destroying cars? And what's ironic is the left told us that cars were destroying the planet. But in truth, it is the planet destroying cars. Now, I fully expect the left to say this is the planet getting even with cars. But still the irony. So much of what the left does is constantly exposed as stupid, as fraudulent, as irresponsible. In real live news, you can point to the living hypocrisy of the American left and the Democrat Party. Okay, let's get to the latest here with before we get to the judges and the status of the impeachment, because it's 3 judges now. People are forgetting about the judge in February. There are 3 judges now openly questioning the entire Mueller investigation from their positions on the bench. And perhaps one of the funniest ones, you remember when Mueller indicted 13 Russian troll farms? They're housed in Ukraine or Stalingrad, Leningrad, Snowdengrad, wherever they are. And, of course, these indictments, Mueller never expects these people to respond. Mueller never expects these people to show up. Mueller never expects these people to be extradited. Mueller never, so he indicts them purely for the PR of it. Indicting these 13 Russian troll farms and their supposed monkeying around with Facebook and Twitter and the selling of ads or placement of ads was designed to further the illusion that Trump colluded with Russia. Well, one of these troll farms has decided to show up and answer the charges. And Mueller has been totally taken aback. They don't know what to do because now, if they pursue this, Mueller is going to have to display his case. Mueller is going to have to answer discovery. Mueller is going to have to put on display what he's got against these Russian troll farms. And it's the last thing look, do not doubt me. It is the last thing Mueller ever expected to happen. The firm is Concord Management. And I am as sure as I'm sitting here that Mueller had no idea that any of these 13 Russian firms or entities would do anything in response to the indictment. But Concord Management and Consulting, they were accused, by the way, of knowingly and intentionally conspiring to interfere with the election by using social media to disparage Hillary and support Trump. That's the charge. And so they are showing up to defend themselves. And this indictment was obviously nothing more than a PR stunt. And in the process of defending the charge, Concord Management could force Mueller to turn over discovery about how the case was assembled, as well as any evidence that might undermine the prosecution's theories. Now, Mueller, the special counsel, had to move at rapid pace here in response to this. His team tried to say that the Concord Management people never formally accepted the court summons related to the case, so they really can't defend them. Mueller's trying to tell them they can't defend themselves because the time has passed, that they didn't formally accept the court summons, i.e., they didn't accept the demand to be extradited. But the Russians hit back on this. They filed a response Friday to let the court know that they voluntarily appear through counsel as provided in the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure. They further intend to enter a plea of not guilty. And they want to demonstrate that all of this is a bunch of hooey. And I guarantee you this is the last thing Mueller ever thought he was going to have to deal with. Now, before we get into the detailed discussion of all three of these judges, that's one of the cases there, we have to go to NPR. Weekend edition Saturday. Sometimes NPR has a guy on to translate me for the NPR audience. And it's usually done fairly. I mean, it's not a hit piece by any stretch. It's a service that somebody at NPR realized, okay, if we're going to play a Rush Limbaugh soundbite, we may need to translate it for our leftist audience. So in this case, it's Weekend Edition Saturday. Scott Simon is the host, speaking with Brian Mann, the correspondent, about the NRA convention in Dallas. Scott Simon says many of the student survivors of that violence, Parkland, Florida, and national figures have pointed again and again to the NRA. Do you have a sense of that at the NRA, at the convention center here?
There's a lot of deep distrust here of traditional news organizations like ours. I had a conversation with one gun owner this week who was convinced that the moral outrage after Parkland was just sort of concocted and fake. And I told him I had interviewed kids and parents who endured that horror in Florida, who want more restrictions on firearms, that they weren't fake and weren't part of some liberal conspiracy. And he seemed really surprised. And I think it's important to remember that a lot of these folks get their news and information from very different sources, including the NRA's own new TV network that they've launched, but also from places like Fox News and Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, so you see my name thrown in here in the hopper to help explain why people don't really understand what happened at Parkland, or worse, think that the aftermath of Parkland was a bit phonied up. Well, just two bits of information. First, the NRA set a record for attendance at this year's convention, a total of 87,154 attendees. Has anybody stopped to think? I'm sure many of you have. We are told routinely that there are over 300 million guns in America. That's more than one gun per person. What are the percentage of the 300 million guns you think are owned by leftists? So you got 300 million guns out there. How many of them are owned by leftists? Give me a number. What do you think? 5, 10, 15, 20, 100? Or are they hypocrites? And do they own maybe 100 million, a third of them? Maybe 20%. Okay. And so they really think they can survive if it comes to this? So how stupid are they? Do they really think they'll be able to survive? If they provoke this, if they provoke what they're provoking, and all it would take is a serious effort to get those guns out of the hands of the 300 million people who love and cherish them, they think they stand a chance here? There's one other bit of information. You remember we were the first to reveal on this program, the Promise program, the federal program. The acronym for it is Promise, that was put in place by the superintendent in Broward County. His guy's name is Runcie. They imported him from Chicago. Remember, he was the architect of the Promise program. Do you remember what the Promise program is? You do? Tell me. Just tell me what it is. I'll see if you pass the test. All right. Well, what it was, pretty close. They decided, the Obama administration decided that they didn't like the fact that the greatest percentage of prisoners behind bars was African American. They thought that meant the criminal justice system was biased against African Americans, and a bunch of innocent African Americans had been put in jail because the country's inherently racist. Now, they used that statistic, civil rights community and Reverend Jackson and his crowd used that statistic repeatedly to argue for the innocence of African Americans that had been charged with various crimes by suggesting a country with only, 10 to 11, 13% population African American, over half the prison population is African American. It's a racist country. And so the Promise program came along, and its purpose was that whenever felonies were committed, especially by minors or young adults, that were African American, they were to be ignored. And they were be charged to a much lesser crime so as to avoid placing these perps in prison. This was seen as a solution to the unfair, racist, and bigoted policies that had put so many African Americans in jail, and as they wanted us to believe, illegally and undeservedly. Well, when the case of this shooter in Parkland came up, his last name was Cruz, and remember in the aftermath we learned how many different times various people were warned. Law enforcement was warned. The number of times is in the 30s or 40s that this guy was something bad news. Do something before this guy does what he's going to do. There were even a couple of people who warned the cops and the sheriff that this guy may light up a school. It was all ignored because of the Promise program. Because if you're going to have to ignore felonies committed by African Americans, you're going to have to ignore felons committed by others as well. Otherwise, the program doesn't work, because if you start divvying up justice by race, it's going to get noticed eventually. So they had to go lax on every. It turns out that Mr. Runcie had said in response to numerous questions 5 or 6 times that this Cruz guy, no, the Promise program had nothing to do with him. This guy never interacted with the Promise program. We never exempted this guy. The news from over the weekend is that he was exempted from actions that he had taken by the invocation of the Promise program 5 different times. 5 different times the shooter at the high school was essentially let go because of the Promise program. Marco Rubio has since found out about this and is livid because everybody was lied to about it. Now, this would not have come up until much later in the program today, except I had this soundbite from NPR, which they need to translate what you and I believe. So I wanted to take the occasion here to be crystal clear that much of what you've been told about the aftermath, well, even before the shooting, the Promise program was a huge factor. This guy could have been taken off the streets because of previous crimes committed if it weren't for this Obama program called Promise. Another left-wing program designed to even out the injustices born of a racist America. So they artificially impose beliefs such as we have a racist criminal justice system and then create a law to deal with that artificiality. And it's typical when the left gets involved, rolls up its sleeves, and starts monkeying with basic sociology. They make a mess out of everything. They ruin everything they touch. It ends up being corrupted. It ends up being damaged one way or the other. Take a time out here. We'll come back and review the 3 different instances where judges from the bench have blown to smithereens the concept and the premise of the Mueller investigation. Back after this. By the way, the Russian troll farm that decided to defend itself, one of the 13 entities charged by Mueller with monkeying around with social media to help Trump beat Hillary. Concord Management decided to defend itself. The Mueller team asked the judge for a delay, because this means Mueller's going to have to turn over all the evidence that he has to substantiate his charge against this outfit. But Mueller's team, because they were never expecting this, folks, this is great. Mueller's team immediately asked for a delay in order to postpone such revelations as long as possible, because a Wall Street Journal story today about a special counsel may have to go dark at some point later this year leading up to the midterm elections. Not that the special counsel is going to wrap it up and then, no, that he might have to go dark, which is a crock. The special counsel isn't going to go dark. The special counsel's not going to stop leaking. The special counsel is not going to stop trying to get Donald Trump. They're going to rev it up as we get closer to the midterms, not go dark. They might say they're going to go dark. They might want you to believe they're going to go dark, but they're not going to go dark. They're not going to go silent. They're not going to shut down. Now, this firm, Concord Management, deciding to answer the charge, they want this trial right now. They want the evidence presented right now. Mueller asked for a delay, and the judge said no. They wanted to postpone any reveal, any revelations of evidence they've got against the troll farm as long as possible. The judge in the case denied their motion for a delay. So things could get there have been 3 instances now where judges have either offered unsolicited opinions from the bench or issued rulings that are perilous, potentially damaging for the special counsel. And it's got the left discombobulated. Adam Schiff, pencil necks, running around. This is very inappropriate. I think these judges to be speaking the way they're speaking, these judges to be... See, these people are used to a clear playing field with no opposition on the field. And the minute opposition shows up, and I remember they're running a con game anyway here, folks. They're running a scam. And these judges are in the process here, whether intentionally or inadvertently, they're running the risk of exposing this about Mueller legally, not just from opinions from people on radio, TV, blogs, or what have you. So it's a perilous time in the sense that they're dealing with things at the special counsel office that have not been put in their way before, obstacles and so forth. Also, some earth-shattering news about redactions in the House Intelligence Committee report. Hang on. Hi. How are you? Rush Limbaugh, mentor to the nation. Here behind the golden EIB microphone at 800-282-2882, the email address lrushmore@eibnet.us. On Friday, the House Intelligence Committee released a new report that featured a whole bunch of redactions being viewable. There's been an argument. There's been a fight between the House Intelligence Committee and the Department of Justice and the FBI for information and data relating to all of their investigations and Flynn and the whole kitchen caboodle. And The FBI and the DOJ have submitted, they've responded to some requests with a lot of heavily redacted documents. But Devin Nunes persisted, pressure was applied, and on Friday, we had a disclosure of previously redacted sections of the intelligence community's Russia report. And folks, it was a bombshell, and I'll tell you why. The FBI and the DOJ said the reason for the redactions originally was to protect national security and the usual excuses. Protect national security and protect people who may not be involved in this, have been named here, just protect their identities and so forth. Just total BS. Do you know what the redactions were? The redactions were the FBI and the DOJ covering up what they had done to protect themselves, primarily in the pursuit of Michael Flynn. They had redacted pretty much all of the information, data, memos, and so forth that really gave up the ghost in terms of what they were doing. It had nothing to do with national security. It had nothing to do with legitimate reasons for keeping information private. It was strictly to protect themselves, to protect their bad judgment, to protect the scam that they were engaged in this entire Russian investigation. They redacted information that would have been helpful to Michael Flynn. Andy McCarthy submitted a column in National Review last night. It was published today. It's quite lengthy. And if you want the lowdown on every smidgen detail of this, I would strongly suggest that you read Andy's column today at National Review Online. I'm just going to give you some highlights and overall, headline material. The basic premise here is that everybody that talked to Michael Flynn and everybody who wrote memos after the interview of Michael Flynn was convinced that he had not lied. They've got Comey telling two different stories under oath about this. They've got McCabe dead to rights. I mean, it is outrageous what has gone on here. Flynn has pled guilty to something that nobody in the FBI thought that he did. They did not think that he lied. The agents that interviewed him, one of them which was Peter Strzok, and the way that interview happened, it was in the White House. Flynn was in the White House, or Flynn was somewhere that he was supposed to be during the transition. He was somewhere where the team was, and he got a note that somebody at the FBI wanted to talk to him, and Flynn thought that it was a standard, ordinary, run-of-the-mill conversation that he would have with the FBI, as any person in his position would be, national security advisor, getting the new president ready to assume office later in January. It turned out that was an actual interview where they tried to get Flynn to lie and trip up. He was not even told that's what it was. And despite even that, they didn't think that he had lied. Michael Flynn got railroaded, and the redactions from the DOJ and the FBI, the material they submitted to the House Intelligence Committee, now has been unredacted, and it's plain as day to see. And it is truly outrageous. And if these people at the FBI, the DOJ, burying their own judgment, burying their own information that was helpful to Flynn, if they're willing to do that, think they might bury information regarding tarmac meetings, disruption of emails, misleading FISA courts. This is another thing. It has become obvious now that the FISA court was misled about the Steele dossier. Pretty much everything that we think has gone on has, in fact, factually gone on here. Flynn was railroaded. He did not lie, according to the people that investigated him and interviewed him. But this points to another problem, folks, that really needs to be discussed. Remember last week during a couple of segments on the program here, I said if you just landed from Mars, you would get the idea that there's this guy with a permanent job to investigate the duly elected president and to sit in judgment of him every day and leak information about what you found. In other words, the president's not the president. This guy, in this case Mueller, this counsel, special counsel, that's the guy that has the power. That's the guy that determines whether or not the president is legit and stays in office. And why is that? Because the way things have been structured, it looks like Mueller is the guy with the ultimate power in Washington, and Trump is merely a subordinate. And of course, as Mr. McCarthy points out so cleverly in his piece, the Constitution does not mention the Department of Justice. There is no DOJ in the U.S. Constitution. You know who created it? Congress. Congress created the DOJ. Congress created the court system. As such, they have review authority over it. And the president runs the executive branch and is subordinate to no one there. Not Mueller, not Rod Rosenstein, not anybody. So there needs to be a question asked. The president of the United States can authorize the declassification of anything he wants at any time. These redactions have been allowed to exist for months. While the case against Flynn was built and he was charged, well, he copped a plea because they were bankrupting him. But I'm not kidding. There's nobody in the FBI who thinks that he lied in any of the interviews with him. Remember, we've always thought that the NSA, the DOJ, whoever was surveilling the Russian ambassador, Kislyak, and that Flynn was picked up inadvertently because we're surveilling the Russian ambassador like we monitor all phone calls of foreign agents, ambassadors, and so forth. Standard practice. The possibility, after these redactions have been unredacted, the possibility exists is that Flynn, in fact, was targeted and was surveilled on purpose. This may go deeper than any of us know, but the point is the president of the United States could have seen to these redactions being unredacted weeks ago, months ago. He runs the Department of Justice. He runs the FBI. The reason that he hasn't, I think, are twofold. I think his lawyers, his team of lawyers up until now, maybe including the ones that he's got now, are truly on the defensive and are scared to death that if Trump exercises any of his legitimate constitutional authority, that they're going to start shouting obstruction of justice, obstruction of justice. The president of the United States cannot obstruct justice by executing his constitutional duties. He simply cannot. Firing James Comey is not an obstruction of justice. Telling the FBI and Rosenstein and Sessions to unredact all this stuff weeks ago, months ago, would not have been obstruction of justice. But Trump's lawyers, I think, are convinced that a public media case could be made that Trump was obstructing and do Trump damage in terms of public opinion, which, of course, is the objective here. It always has been to drive Trump's public approval numbers, presidential approval numbers, way, way down, because that's the only way they're going to be able to get rid of him if they can't at the ballot box. A president cannot be indicted. Justice Department guidelines and rules. He cannot be indicted. It's an open question where he can be forced up to answer a subpoena, but indictments, no way. The second reason, and I may get in some hot water for this, the second reason I think Trump has not made a move to unredact all this stuff and let the truth be known is because, in a political sense, I think the White House views Trump being seen as a victim as a positive politically. Trump as a victim of Mueller. Trump as a victim of Rosenstein. This permits Trump to continue tweeting out left and right how unfair it is, what a witch hunt it is, what all of this is, and questioning the motives and the actions these people are taking, and that he sees value in this. In other words, that Trump base voters will stay tightly bonded to Trump as long as they think he's being persecuted. As long as this is I think the White House calculation, that there is a political plus in being seen as a victim of this deep state, of this cabal that's out to get him. But in the process, he's allowing this circumstance I just described. You land here from Mars, you think Robert Mueller runs this country. And behind him, Rosenstein, when neither of them do. And Trump could get rid of any of them anytime he wants. I know, political fallout, but I'm just talking about legally, constitutionally. Trump can get rid of whoever he wants. There is no obstruction of justice. If it would come down to impeachment or whatever, there would be no obstruction of justice by simply executing his constitutional duties. And there certainly would be no obstruction of justice if Trump's approval numbers are not down in the 20s or 30s, because they're not going to make a move to impeach him anyway. We've got sound bites coming up, and you're going to hear more and more Democrats, worried as they can be about all this talk about impeachment. Something's happened out there. I think it's Trump's approval numbers moving up. Something has happened. The left is getting a little bit squirmy, if you will, about this whole notion of impeachment. And more of them are urging Democrat candidates to drop it, don't talk about it, because their internal polling on it has got to be disastrous. Because the people that elected Trump are in no way anywhere near ready to abandon him. Selena Zito's got a book coming out tomorrow that's going to explain exactly why that is. She's the only journalist that has taken the time to actually get to know the people responsible for electing Donald Trump, who they are, where they come from, who they used to vote for, why they voted for Trump, why they're sticking with Trump. Her book is out tomorrow. I'll get to the title here in a minute. Point is that Trump could end this and could have ended this. He could have seen to it the House had what it wanted weeks ago by ordering whatever was redacted to be unredacted. But I'm sure his lawyers are scared to death that if he does that he's opening himself up to the perception of obstructing justice when it's in no way obstructing justice. Yeah, the Great Revolt. That's Selena Zito's book, comes out to The Great Revolt. And folks, it is fantastic. I might add. But this is really an important point here that the president, the White House, I'm sure envisions value in being seen as a victim here in terms of keeping the bond, keeping Trump's voters tightly bonded or glued to him. Let me expand on this. There's a lot of backup for this that I want to offer. Plus, your phone calls are coming up. Lots still to do. As always, back after this. Now, in regards to something going on out there, to all these Democrats and all these media types now backing off the whole notion of impeachment. Now, I mentioned that the polling data is such that they're getting nervous. Look at this. There is a new poll. This is from, it's a Reuters poll. And it shows that Trump's approval rating has spiked, jumped up since April 27th. Reuters has decided to quarantine the data. Reuters has decided not to publish it. The spike shows Trump getting 50% support from swing voting independents, 80% support from Republicans, and 20% support from Democrats. And the Reuters Ipsos people say this doesn't make any sense. This is unexplained. And so they're rejecting it. Reuters is telling people, they're releasing it, they're telling people they don't believe it. They're rejecting their own poll. When's the last time you saw this? It has happened, by the way. April 27th, again, Reuters Ipsos. Trump's getting 50% support from swing voter independents, 80% support from Republican supporters, 20% support from Democrats. Very few people are declaring themselves not sure in the Reuters poll. Reuters is saying they don't believe it. They are rejecting their own poll. Something is happening. I don't want to make it sound like there's something big and dramatic, but I think what's happening is that what has always been there, a bunch of people fed up with the deep state, fed up with Mueller, fed up with the media, fed up with these Obama people, fed up with the villains as they know them, fed up with it, and they're finally being asked about it now, and they're answering. I don't think people are newly outraged at this. I don't think they're freshly angry. I think they have been since it all began. But the media and the pollsters think this is all brand new and it doesn't make sense to them, so they're spiking this particular poll. Now, let me expand on something else. These redactions show that, once again, Comey not telling the truth. The unredactions show for an absolute fact that Comey has been lying to the American people when in his interviews he's claimed he did not tell the House Intelligence Committee that the agents who interviewed Flynn didn't think he lied. He did. He did say that. Let me expand on this when we come back from the break at the top of the hour. Sit tight, my friends. We're just getting warmed up. Hi, welcome back. Great to have you. Rush Limbaugh, having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have, mentoring the nation, including the nation's millennials, and happily doing so. Telephone number if you want to be on the program. We got a full board. We're going to be going to the phones pretty soon here, so if you're on hold, please be patient. 800-282-2882 if you want to appear on the program. Now, so as try to make the complex understandable, let me go through this from top to bottom again in terms of structure. The House Intelligence Committee has been requesting information from the FBI and the DOJ in its investigation into the investigation. House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, his gang, they've been looking at the way the investigation has been handled. They have requested all kinds of stuff. And the DOJ has stalled. The FBI has stalled. They have said, we're not going to send it to you. You don't deserve it. Just because you want it doesn't mean you get it. We got important stuff to do here. Well, Congress created the DOJ. Congress created the FBI. Congress has oversight. The president runs all of that. The Congress is entitled to whatever they want to see here. And the president, by the way, it would not be obstruction of justice for the president to order the DOJ to turn over what Congress has been requesting. That would not be obstruction. This stuff could have been dealt with a long time ago if Trump would have simply decided to tell the DOJ and the FBI, let them have it. Trump runs the DOJ, not Mueller, not Rosenstein. Trump has not done so. I'm convinced because his legal team inside the White House thinks that that would be seen as obstruction of justice, and so he's staying out of it. I think there's another component. I think Trump loves, when I say Trump, the White House, the entire team loves Trump being seen as the victim. They think that Trump, as the victim of these big, bad deep state guys, will solidify the relationship he has with his base. I have no doubt that this is the case because Trump could have forced this released weeks ago, months ago. But then there wouldn't be any need for the tweets about how unfair the witch hunt is and all that. Now, this does not involve Mueller per se. This is the DOJ and the FBI. And these redactions that were released on Friday, eventually the DOJ and the FBI complied simply because of pressure being brought to bear. And so they released some information that caused the House Intelligence Committee to reveal on Friday a report that had unredacted some of the redacted information. And what was unredacted blew a bunch of things to smithereens, including the fact that Michael Flynn has been railroaded. What was originally redacted was not damaging to national security. It wasn't damaging to other cases going on. The FBI, the DOJ, redacted things to basically cover up their bad judgment and their mistakes that they had made during the course of this investigation of Flynn per se. But it's broader than that because it also includes Comey. So they simply were redacting things to protect themselves from being discovered and seen for what they had done. And now the report has released all of this. And we find out that there isn't a single person who interviewed Michael Flynn who thought he had lied. And yet there he is pleading guilty to that very charge from Mueller. So what the hell is going on? Why did Flynn plead guilty to something he didn't do and that nobody in the FBI thinks he did? And was the judge who accepted the plea in the case told that nobody in the FBI thought Flynn had lied? Was Flynn told? Were his lawyers told that nobody in the FBI thought he had lied? This is why the sentencing of Flynn has continually been delayed and why there's a new judge in this case. Flynn pled guilty to protect his family, to save whatever was left of his estate. You know, he's like Michael Caputo, had to put his house up for sale. He's had to just stop the battle here because he can't afford it. So that's what has happened. That's what the unredacted information is. And these redactions, or these unredactions, show that once again, James Comey is not to be trusted. I touched on this briefly in the opening hour. The unredactions in the Friday release of the House Intel report show that Comey has been lying to the American public during his book tour, when in his interviews he's claimed he did not tell the House Intelligence Committee that the agents who interviewed Flynn didn't think he lied. Oh, it's not my recollection. I don't think anybody told me. I'm not aware. Don't believe that's the case. I don't recall having. No. It looks like the FBI was stonewalling on these redactions simply to protect themselves and, to a certain extent, Comey. So if that's the case, what other things are being redacted to protect Comey and the other Obama administration holdovers? And, folks, it isn't a small point, because we now have Comey and McCabe on record saying the FBI agents do not think Flynn lied, and one of those agents is Peter Strzok. And the whole way the interview was set up was subterfuge. Flynn was being interviewed, officially interviewed, and didn't know it. He thought he was engaged in a national security conversation as the president's national security advisor during the transition. He had no idea that they were actually conducting an interview based on what they thought he had said to Kislyak. You remember what this is about, if I may hopscotch backwards here. This is about the fact that the FBI, the DOJ, Mueller, all of these people were trying to prove that Flynn had promised a quid pro quo to the Russians. They wanted, and they alluded to this, even though it didn't happen. There were leaks from the deep state all over the news in December of 2016, January of 2017, that Flynn had privately told the Russian ambassador to just be patient, that when Trump's in office, we're going to take back all these sanctions and we're going to get rid of whatever Obama did, but you can't tell anybody. They actually leaked that that's what Flynn had talked with the Russian ambassador about, and he did not. He did not lie when he said that that's not something that came up. He did mislead Vice President Pence about something which still is somewhat mysterious, but he did not lie to the FBI. And yet he has been railroaded into copping a plea to just that. And when you boil all this down, they've got even less than we thought they had. They don't have anything on Flynn. They don't have anything on Trump. And now we're taken back to these three judges that have now called out this investigation. I've spoken about one of them, and that's the Concord Management case, one of the Russian troll farms. 13 of them that Mueller indicted for having tampered with Facebook and Twitter, that these people had run ads, that the Russians had sponsored and paid for these people to run the ads on Facebook and Twitter. And the purpose of the ads was to tell people that Donald Trump had stolen the election from Hillary Clinton or something like that. It was all a bunch of lies. Since then, we've learned that the amount of money they spent on ads and the number of ads would not even cause a ripple in the ocean. They could not have had any impact whatsoever. But Mueller, for PR purposes, indicted these Russian troll farms and accused them of trying to sabotage the American election with the placement of ads on Facebook and Twitter. But one of these firms has decided to plead not guilty. They've decided to respond. Mueller never expected this, because these were PR indictments. These are Russians, Ukrainians. There's no extradition treaty. There's no way Mueller thought these people would even respond. So he thought he had a free and clear way of scoring a major PR victory by indicting 13 Russian troll farms for tampering with the American election via Facebook and Twitter. Well, one of them has decided to respond to plead not guilty. They're demanding to see all of the evidence that Mueller has that he used to indict them. They're demanding for all kinds of discovery to see just what Mueller found out, what evidence he's got so that they can defend themselves. Mueller, so taken aback, asked the judge for a delay, a postponement, and the judge denied. So now the special counsel's office has to come up with, and they have to put on display to Concord Management's legal team, all of the evidence they claim to have to prove that these people tried to tamper with the American election. And again, Mueller never intended this to happen, because the reason you indict a bunch of foreigners with no extradition treaty is so that they never hear from them again. The theory is, yeah, we got the goods on them. We know they did it, but they're not going to respond because they don't have to. There's no extradition treaty. Well, these people at one of the 13 troll farms has decided to defend themselves. So as of Friday, 3 separate judges have spoken out or ruled against the Mueller investigation. Now, the first one, and people may not remember this one, the first one was in February. The federal judge assigned to the criminal case against Flynn, Judge Emmett Sullivan, ordered Mueller's team to turn over any exculpatory evidence to Flynn's defense. This would be what we learned in the unredacted House Intel Committee report on Friday, that there isn't a soul at the FBI that thought Flynn had lied. Judge Sullivan in February ordered Mueller's team to turn over any exculpatory evidence to Flynn's defense. Instead, Judge Sullivan issued the order invoking the Brady Rule, which requires prosecutors to turn over previously unfiled evidence that might have a material impact on a defendant's case. 2 days before the judge's order, Mueller had filed a motion for a protective order regarding the use of evidence in the case, including sensitive materials which would be provided to Flynn's lawyers, meaning they wouldn't have to turn over this exculpatory stuff. And implication was that maybe Flynn might not have pled guilty if he'd have known that nobody at the FBI thought he lied. Mueller knew that not a soul that interviewed Flynn thought that he had lied. And yet, look what he did. Pursued Flynn to bankruptcy. Pursued Flynn toward the point where Flynn had no choice but then to plead guilty to stop this because he was out of money. And where's Flynn going to go get money? But they've destroyed Flynn at this point. Flynn doesn't have any PR. Flynn doesn't have any supporters. Everybody thinks Flynn's guilty as hell here on innuendo alone, but everybody involved on the prosecution side knows that nobody that interviewed him thought that he had lied. Including, again, Peter Strzok. And then, of course, we had the judge last week, Judge T.S. Ellis, who just excoriated Mueller's team in his courtroom for all kinds of things, including noting that the special counsel's indictment against Manafort doesn't mention Russian individuals, Russian banks, Russian money, Russian payments to Manafort. The judge accused them of just wanting to get to Manafort, to get to Trump, that their real purpose is to get Trump. It was unprecedented for a judge to speak this way, and the judge, T.S. Ellis, demanded the memo from Rosenstein to Mueller that gave him his original instructions or charge in beginning this investigation. It's called the Scope Memo. And Mueller has resisted making it public, so has Rosenstein. This judge has demanded to see it within 2 weeks. He did say that he would accept it in private in his chambers. He would look at it himself before making it public. But he said that Mueller should not have unfettered power to prosecute Manafort for charges that have nothing to do with Russian collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Now, I just want to tell you something here about this. If this gets thrown out, and that's what this is ultimately about, Manafort wants the case thrown out for basically what the judge said. This case got nothing to do with collusion. This happens before the presidential campaign even begun. This is unfair. The DOJ had already looked at Manafort on these charges and decided not to pursue. Here comes Mueller. We're going to get Manafort because Manafort was close to Trump. If this judge throws Manafort's case out, it isn't over. They'll just change the venue. They'll go back and refile the charges in a different court, different jurisdiction. It won't mean that Manafort's off the hook if this judge grants him a win here in Tosca. Mueller is not going to let this go. No matter what this judge does, he'll find a judge that's not a Reagan appointee or jurisdiction and refile the case against Manafort somewhere else. This will not be double jeopardy because Manafort will not have been tried and found not guilty. If his case is thrown out because this judge says there's no basis for this case, then Manafort will still have to deal with the possibility that Mueller will take it to another court. And, of course, the third judge is the judge in the Concord management case, which I've been describing. So 3 different judges now, either by ruling or proclamation, have dealt serious blows not only to Mueller's case, but Mueller's intentions. Now, up next, audio sound bites that illustrate this is having an impact on the left and the Democrat Party and their enthusiasm for impeachment. But before we get to that, I got to get started on the phone. So that is coming next, right after this. Okay, as I said, we're going to start on the phones. We got Fritz from Fort Lauderdale. Fritz, I'm glad you called, sir. You're up first today. How are you doing?
I'm good, Rush. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Regarding the Flynn railroading, perhaps an alternative view of this could be that, as I remember, he was being investigated for issues regarding Turkey and hundreds of thousands of dollars of payment and other issues. And I'm very sympathetic to Flynn and his situation. And maybe both sides agreed to plead guilty to lying to the FBI as a fig leaf so that he could turn state's evidence and not have all those other issues, Turkey, the payments, or whatever else they were investigating, come up. Not that they were railroaded so much as it was by mutual agreement. Because I notice we don't hear from Flynn or his attorneys with regard to this now.
Well, we have had a change of judge in the case, and I think look, all I'm telling you is, if you want to bring in hypotheticals, you feel free to do it. I'm telling you what we know. Michael Flynn has pled guilty to lying to the FBI when nobody at the FBI thinks that he did. And the FBI covered up that fact by refusing to reveal that information to the House Intelligence Committee looking into all of this deep state activity. So over here we have the FBI and the DOJ pursuing a guy for a crime they know that he didn't commit, that they will not reveal that they knew he didn't commit. And in the process, Michael Flynn has been bankrupted, or close to it, and has been forced to accept this plea to stop the bleeding. And we've only learned now that none of this had been necessary. So that is fact. You want to take this and say, well, maybe Flynn did know. Maybe they did tell Flynn that they know he didn't lie. But Flynn, we're going to do you a deal. You flip on Trump, tell us what we want to know, and we'll tell everybody that you lied to the FBI. And that's it. You'll serve a little jail time, but we're not going to pursue you for the really, really big criminal stuff that you did. If you want to go that way with the hypothetical, feel free. But I'm not dealing with hypotheticals here. But since you brought it up, I would suggest that if they've got Flynn on stuff much bigger than lying to the FBI, they would have hammered him. Remember what this has always been about. This is about teaching everybody involved here, you don't do this. You don't associate with an outsider that becomes president. You don't violate us here in the deep state. We'll just have to wait and see where this all pans out. But facts are where I like to keep this for now. On the cutting edge of societal evolution, Rush Limbaugh, man, a legend, a way of life. The saga continues. Here is Greg in Tampa. Great to have you, sir. How be it?
Mega dittos, Rush.
Thank you.
I think that General Flynn was the original target of the Obama administration and the Obama State Department. He was a vocal opponent of the Iran deal, which was Obama's, legacy foreign policy achievement. And the State Department targeted him. They, unmasked his name. They trapped him in lying to the FBI.
They may not have unmasked him. He may have been targeted for surveillance. There may have been a tap on him.
Either way, it was an opportunity to embarrass the vice president. It was an opportunity to get Flynn fired. And then I think this whole Russian narrative, when they saw how successful that was, just fell into their laps.
Well, you're right about that last thing, except they found that out during the actual Iran deal, not during Flynn. Let me explain. You're right. Flynn was despised by Obama. Flynn was literally hated by Obama. Obama fired Flynn. Flynn he ran the Defense Intelligence Agency. Flynn's never been anything but a super patriot. Decorated soldier, decorated military man. First such person to support and endorse Trump and work with him on the campaign trail. This just frosted Obama. And you're right. Flynn opposed the Iran deal and was very public about it, thought it was a bad deal. So this is a get even with him kind of thing. There's no question. But the trial run for the deep state attempt to get rid of Donald Trump actually began with the Iran deal. Now, the details of this have been provided by Lee Smith at a website called tablet.com. And I'm going to paraphrase very briefly. The Obama administration knew that there were all kinds of domestic critics of the Iran deal. They wanted to know who they were and what they were saying. And so they were spying. The Obama administration got warrants and was spying on domestic Americans to gather data on them. And the way they pulled all of this off was to incorporate the media in such a way that had not been done before. Up until Obama's Iran deal, for the most part, the media distrusted intelligence community people. If you go back as recently as 1979, Democrat Frank Church from Indiana, Idaho, forget which, literally sought to get rid of the CIA. The liberal Democrat Party hated the CIA, despised them, because they thought the CIA was engaging in rogue operations around the world in anti-democratic ways. The point being that there was not a friendly association with the intelligence community and the media. When Obama's Iran deal came up, an attempt was made to actually use the intelligence community, quote unquote, to leak bits of news, true and false, to a couple of reporters to find out what would happen. And what the Obama administration found out was that they had enough reporters who were literal groupies and sycophants that they would accept whatever intelligence community people told them and run with it without even trying to verify it. One example is a guy named Adam Entis, who has worked at the Atlantic, I think New Yorker, maybe Washington Post. They leaked to this guy that the Russians had actually engaged in sabotage of the electric grid in Vermont so successfully that a major dam in Vermont had been taken offline. The guy ran with it without even calling anybody in Vermont. And the truth was there was never, ever an interruption of service in the electrical grid and no damage to any dam. But the Obama administration learned, not just with Adam Entis, a couple others, that it would be very easy to incorporate the media in advancing its goals vis-a-vis the Iran deal. And when they saw how easy that was the trial ground, the proving ground, if you will, for the current operation, the Steele dossier, the media, and getting rid of Trump with this phony charge about Trump colluding with the Russians. And so the bottom line for much of this is that if you trace it back to its origins, you'll find Obama and Hillary Clinton at the starting point for all of these efforts that have been mounted and are in current operation to get rid of Donald Trump, to drive down his approval numbers such that it would make removing him via impeachment or the 25th Amendment, however way they tried to do it, according to the Constitution, doable. And it's blown up in their faces. They have not been able to drive Trump's approval numbers down. If they can't do that, they're not going to be able to impeach him, because impeachment is a political thing. It's really not criminal. And they don't have a crime here. Everybody knows now they don't have a crime. They don't have a crime of collusion. They don't have Trump on a crime of anything. And they've been looking intensely for 2.5 years to find any illegality on Trump they can. And now Reuters has a new poll out showing Trump's approval numbers are spiking, and they don't believe it. They think their poll is a one-off. Now, this is not right, so they're not putting any stock in it. They just don't believe it's true. And you can't blame them. Reuters, AP, you name it, they have spent the last 2.5 years doing nothing but trying to destroy Trump. In their minds, it's not possible, given what they've been doing, that Trump's popularity could be increasing. Just not possible. Trump's popularity ought to be going down based on what they are doing. Meaning all the negative stories, all of the relentless ratcheting up of every bit of anti-Trump news they can come up with. They just can't believe that Trump's numbers are going up. Which takes us to the audio soundbites I have here that will kind of document this. We're going to start with Steve Schmidt. Steve Schmidt ran the McCain campaign in 2008. Steve Schmidt remains a very popular Republican consultant. He remains a Republican consultant who has not won. And thus he is a perfect Republican spokesman for MSNBC and other places. He is a famous never-Trumper. He is a fervent and energetic never-Trumper. He has wished for Trump's demise, political demise, since Trump entered the campaign. Sunday night on Showtime's The Circus. This is the show with Mark McKinnon and I forget the other guy. Mental block. Mark Halperin was part of this show until they found out he was Harvey Weinstein Jr. And so McKinnon says to Schmidt, what if I were to say to you, hypothetically, the Republicans are running with historically low unemployment, historically high consumer confidence. Peace is breaking out in the Korean Peninsula. You can run on peace and prosperity, right?
For sure, if you had Ronald Reagan as your president, but not this guy. Unless the race becomes a referendum on impeachment, that's what could snatch defeat from the jaws of victory for the Democrats.
Okay, so what Schmidt is saying, remember, this guy ran McCain's campaign. He's run some other Republican campaigns, have been involved in them, none of them victorious. He's saying that there's no way Trump can win on the economy. There's no way Trump can win on peace on the North Korean Peninsula. There's no way Trump can win with any things he's doing because he's hated and despised. Trump's a reprobate. He's not Reagan. Now, if the Democrats goof up and make impeachment the focal point of their campaign, then Trump could win. What do you think might be the thinking here? No, seriously. I mean, what is this guy? He's a campaign consultant. He obviously believes this. Why is it that Donald Trump cannot win on a great agenda that's in the process of being implemented and is showing demonstrably great results? Historically low unemployment, African-American, Hispanic unemployment, half what it has been. Record low for both demographics. Prospects for end of war threat, nuclear threat in North Korea, manufacturing jobs returning, tax cuts, more money in people's back pockets, the wage increases, tax cuts, and bonuses. Why does that not work for Trump in this guy's mind? Why Trump can't run on that? Why not? And then he turns around and says the only way Trump can win is if Democrats screw up and run on impeaching him. These two don't go together. The only way they go together is if Trump can win on his agenda and the Democrats then start talking about impeaching. That would be a death knell. But you'll notice the scorn and tone of his voice when the prospect of Trump running on all these successful agenda items. Are you kidding me? Sure, if you had Reagan, but not this guy. And here's Karen Finney. Karen Finney is a radical leftist, angry Democrat woman. She'd been in and out of the Hillary campaign, the Clintons on and off during recent years, all the way back to the 1990s. She was on This Week, the roundtable yesterday, the ABC Sunday show. And this is her opinion. She's now Democrat strategist. This is her opinion what the Democrats need to do to win in 2018, the midterms in November.
Rather than sort of popping the champagne about a blue wave, it is time for the Democrats to actually focus on a message. We, in 2006, talked about the culture of corruption. I think they could talk about a culture of corruption on steroids here, and how it is the Republicans in Congress who are protecting this president. You know, they are trying to halt the Russia investigation. They are protecting all of the various things that he's doing. That's a closer to a winning message than letting the Republicans make it about impeachment.
The Republicans are making it about impeachment? When did that happen? She's trying to say the Republicans are accusing the Democrats of running on impeachment. But sorry, but I've heard Auntie Maxine. She still can't stop talking about it. I've heard all these I've heard Adam Schiff until he changed his mind. Impeaching Trump has been their go-to thing since Inauguration Day. But then I think they could talk about a culture of corruption on steroids here and how it is the Republicans in Congress who are protecting Trump. You know, they're trying to halt the Russia investigation. They're protecting all the various things he's. Well, that sounds like the kind of stuff you would impeach him for. And yet she's saying don't run on that. We need to focus on a message. What the message is that Trump is corrupt and you got to get rid of him? How does that differ from impeaching? At the end of the day, they don't have a message. This is their eternal problem. They don't have a message. Right now, they get to run against historically low unemployment. They get to run against a revival of manufacturing jobs. They get to run against a tax cut. They get to run against a foreign policy that's accomplishing things that haven't been accomplished in 30 years in North Korea, South Korea. And they've got a new mascot, a porn star in a G-string walking a runway at the Bada Bing with $20 and $100 bills stuffed in her bikini. Stormy Daniels, that's their new mascot. That's their agenda. That's what they're going to win on. Let me take another time out. I just noticed the clock a little long. Back after this. Fox and Friends today, Ari Fleischer, the former press secretary for George W. Bush. Steve Doocy says, is it Russia, Russia, Russia for Democrats? Is that all they've got to talk about as we head into the November election?
Russia, Russia, Russia is going to be a problem for the Democrats unless Mueller's got the goods. And if Mueller doesn't, the Democrats are the one-trick pony, and that pony ain't riding anymore. And it's not only that. It's how well the economy is doing, the fact that we have 3.9% unemployment. The president is wise to keep banging on the fact that African-American and Hispanic unemployment's at an all-time low. He can actually make up some good numbers with those demographic groups. What's the most important number out there? The president's disapproval was at 58% in December, and now it's down to 52 this morning. If that number gets below 50, that is huge for Republicans running for re-election, because that takes a lot of the energy away from the Democrats who can't stand Donald Trump, and that's what drove a lot of the turnout for the Democrats in the special elections.
Tell you what all of these people are missing, including Mr. Fleischer, but I'm this is not meant to... I'm not hitting him here because he's right about these. Trump's numbers are getting better. Democrats are not going to be able to work on this impeach stuff. What people in the drive-by media are forgetting, if they've ever known it, Trump's base is still there. I'm convinced they truly believe that they have dented Trump's support base. I mean, these Democrats in the drive-by media, they haven't the slightest idea why people voted for Trump. They think they do, but they don't know. There are a lot of Democrats in the Trump coalition. And remember in November of 2011, when it was announced by the Democrat campaign, the Obama campaign in the New York Times, they were abandoning the white working class vote. That's blue-collar, union people, Reagan Democrats. Those people know the Democrat Party has abandoned them. The Democrat Party's in pursuit of minority here, minority there, this grand coalition of all these minorities. Those people, a slew of them voted for Trump, and they are still with him. Because the mistake they are making, and Selena Zito points this out in her book, which is hitting tomorrow, called The Great Divide. Trump did not start any of this. This sentiment has been out there since the Tea Party and probably before. Trump is the guy who is the recipient of this energy and this support because he came along and gave voice to it. But he didn't create it, meaning they can get rid of Trump. Well, they're not going to be able to. But if they did, it wouldn't get rid of Trumpism. And they're missing the point why Trump got elected and how he's going to get reelected, because they live in this dream world where they've destroyed the Trump coalition, or will by the time the next election comes up. And they're misjudging this so magnanimously and profoundly, it's incredible. Yeah, I had audio dyslexia there. It's The Great Revolt by Selena Zito. And she categorized Trump voters 7 different ways, the types of people they are, and who they used to be, and why they voted for Trump, and why they will more than likely stick with him. And I will guarantee you there isn't a person in the drive-by media who gets this. They're not even interested. Hey, look at this headline. Liberalism must be destroyed. Where have you heard that? What you're all saying, you've heard it right here? Is that right? You remember hearing it here? for almost like 30 years, right? But I mean, intensely in the last year and a half, too. Remember, I went to the Media Research Center annual gala, and they play at this gala highlights the award winners, the most outrageous examples of left-wing bias, stupidity, and ignorance. And I've been one of the judges in that contest each and every year for 25 years or so. So they asked me to come keynote the dinner this year, and I did. And I noticed everybody laughing, which, I mean, it's unavoidable. Everybody was laughing at all of these outrageous examples of liberal media ignorance, stupidity, hate, bias, what have you. And I looked around and I saw the room, and there was like 1,000, 1,200 people, and they're all laughing. And it reminded me how I used to laugh, starting in Sacramento in the 80s with the Great Peace March for global nuclear disarmament. And then the environmentalist wackos and the Spotted Owl, Earth First, and then all subsequent organizations and efforts to the left, and some of the crazy things the environmentalist wackos said. We used to laugh at them. And we'd say to ourselves, nobody is going to fall for this. Nobody's going to believe this. We come to find out that stuff that we all laughed at has become mainstream left-wing radicalism. This is the stuff that your kids are taught in school. You're paying $20,000, $40,000, $60,000 a year to send your kids away to actually become members of a cult, which is what I think higher education is today. Your kids are being indoctrinated into cults of left-wing radicalism. So I said in my remarks, folks, we laugh at this, but they believe it. They believe it. And there is no more common ground. We don't overlap. There is no slight area of commonality where we can compromise or agree. They are entirely different from us. And the room got quiet. The room got very sober. And I didn't mean to be taking their fun away. But I think the idea that we have to defeat the left, yeah, some of us agree, but not enough. You know, the conservative intelligentsia in Washington doesn't want to defeat them. The conservative intelligentsia in Washington doesn't even believe that we're in the midst of a crisis in our country. They believe that it's possible to peacefully coexist as long as you have good manners. And as long as we have respect for the other guys, that it's possible to go out and have an adult beverage and talk things over and get along with it. But they don't see any need to defeat them, which when a guy like Trump comes along and starts defeating them, look what they do. The conservative intelligentsia lashes out at Trump as he is in many ways implementing things they have claimed to believe in and support their whole lives. And I have been on this intensely for 2 years. We all want to compromise. We all think there's virtue in it. We all think that it would be a great thing to be able to come to some mutual agreement on things just to lower the intensity level. But it isn't possible because we don't have any areas of overlap of commonality. And so when you start talking about compromise, if you begin to compromise your principles just to get along, what good is that? And by the way, their definition of compromise is us caving on our principles. So anyway, I saw this headline it was sent to me at Town Hall. It's a piece by somebody named Derek Hunter. Liberalism must be destroyed. And I have to tell you, I love this. I'm going to keep my ego in check here. I don't have much of one anyway, but let me just tell you this. What Snerdley told me the other day. It's not even what I told myself. Snerdley said, I can't watch or read media these days without seeing or hearing something you've been saying. Don't care where it is. And I said, you don't have to suck up like that. I still love you. You know, he said, I'm not sucking up. I'm telling you, I turn on the TV, I read, and I think so many things that you've been saying, well, they add up after 30 years. But this by Mr. Hunter, liberalism must be destroyed. Here's how it begins. If you thought conservatives could make nice with liberals, that both sides have the country's best interest at heart, you were wrong. This week, more of the con jobs and character assassinations the political left is attempting have been exposed, and if it doesn't make you realize the liberal industrial complex will stop at nothing to protect itself and destroy the Trump administration, nothing will. The economic news was all good this week, though you'd barely know it if you watch cable news. The unemployment rate dropped to 3.9%, which means nearly everybody who wants a job can find one. Same goes for the predictions that tax cuts would bring about pain and suffering. It's just the exact opposite. So where is the accountability for these politicians, pundits, and journalists who fanned the flames of panic in trying to defeat the economic agenda and tax cuts? Well, there isn't any accountability. Liberals can lie without fear of accountability because the people who would hold them accountable, journalists, are on their side. An example here is given of John Kerry. We haven't mentioned it yet, but here is John Kerry, and this is nothing new, by the way. But we'll deal with it. John Kerry is actually negotiating with his former counterpart in Iran in an attempt to undermine what the duly elected president intends to do regarding the Iranian nuclear deal. And people are shouting, Logan Act violation, Logan Act. Nobody's ever been charged with the Logan Act. That's not what's going to happen here. And it's not the way to deal with this. The way to deal with this is sunshine. People that voted for Donald Trump are not stupid. When this news appears, it has its desired impact. John Kerry is not beloved. There's not a whole lot of people sorry he's gone. There aren't a lot of people wishing he was still Secretary of State. The left may be out there cheering, but the left is not growing, folks. Well, wait a minute. Let me rephrase that. Within the current time frame, the left's political fortunes are not expanding, contrary to all the conventional wisdom out there. They don't have this next election in the bag. They may think they do. They talk like they do. They act like, but they don't. Because nobody yet knows what's going to happen. The one thing that we do know, the one thing that we can be very confident of is that the Trump base is not going to abandon him. Now, Trump is not going to be on any ballot this coming November. So we have to factor that. But Trump's voters know full well what they have to do to support him. Most of them, I mean, exceptions to everything. But the idea that this is new, this is not new. Let me take you back to Ronaldus Magnus. Ronald Reagan, president from 1981 to 1989. And during that period of time, Ronaldus Magnus had as one of his stated intentions to destroy Soviet communism. And, by the way, he did. The American Democrat Party was staunchly opposed to defeating Soviet communism. The Democrat Party of the 1980s was actively supporting Soviet client state communists, such as in Nicaragua. During the 1980s, Senator Edward Kennedy actually wrote a letter to the Soviet leader at the time. They kept dying back then, so I'm not sure if it was Andropov, Yuri Andropov, I don't know if it was Chernenko, forget who, but he wrote whoever it was a letter asking the Soviet leader, don't panic. Do not be impetuous. President Reagan will be dealt with in the United States. Do not do anything dramatic. We're eventually going to be back in control. It was a letter of pure sabotage of the Reagan administration. The Democrat Party supported a client state in Nicaragua and were doing everything they could to undermine Reagan administration efforts to help Nicaragua remain independent so that it would not become a Soviet client state. Many Democrats signed what was called a Dear Commandante letter. The guy they supported down there was a man named Daniel Ortega. And the Democrats defeated a Reagan administration budget proposal that would have authorized money for the Contras in Nicaragua, the Nicaraguans opposing the Soviet client state. Immediately after that vote, Daniel Ortega got on a plane and flew off to Moscow and had a public celebration with Soviet leaders and happily announced that the Soviets had committed to spending some hundreds of millions of dollars in Nicaragua for Ortega. And then Ortega got on a plane and went to New York and went shopping with the song stylists Peter, Paul, and Mary. And Peter, Paul, and Mary took Daniel Ortega on a shopping spree to buy sunglasses. So this is nothing new. And the Democrats wrote Ortega a letter called the Dear Commandante. Please don't embarrass us like this. We give you what you want in the U.S. Congress and you slam it right in our face by having a public meeting with the Soviets. You can't do this. So they knew what was going on. And there are countless other examples of this guy. When George W. Bush was president, you had both Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Bill and Al Gore, who were traveling internationally and delivering anti-Bush statements, anti-Iraq war, anti-war on terrorism. The idea that Democrats undermine sitting Republican presidencies is not new. But it is going to have a different impact this time that the left is not calculating and the media isn't calculating. The media is trying to ignore the Kerry story and not hype it. They're privately cheering it and hoping that Kerry continues. But this kind of stuff, they don't realize that this is helping Trump. Because, again, they do not yet today know who the Trump voters are. They do not know the Trump base. They do not have the slightest idea. They think the Trump voter was a one-time mistake, that the Trump voter realizes it, that Trump is a one-term president. They don't have any idea why these people voted for Trump. They can't figure it out. And if they were told the truth, they wouldn't believe it. So Kerry is off doing this kind of stuff. But it's further evidence of why these people cannot be dealt with, cannot be compromised with. They have to be defeated. There's another pull quote from this story. This week was a stark reminder of the importance of having judges who are interested in the rule of law and the Constitution, not advancing a political agenda. That's what's on the ballot this November. While the idea of beating back the liberal mob in the fields of science, journalism, and Hollywood is appealing and important, those are but the tentacles of the monster. The ballot box and the confirmation votes in the Senate are the only way to truly destroy liberalism. I just hope we destroy it before they destroy everything. They have to be destroyed. And how to do so? Yes, the ballot box is key. And then the judiciary. The judiciary is where the Democrats and the left have their election insurance. For when they lose, they still have the power of the judiciary in their back pocket. Anyway, I just wanted to point it out because the idea is spreading. And you might think Russia doesn't need to be spread. No, folks, everybody doesn't think the left has to be destroyed, defeated. They don't think that. You'd be amazed at the number of people still, particularly elected Republicans, who run for office. There's a guy in North Carolina, Tom Tillis. He still runs on the idea of walking and reaching across the aisle. Compromise. Corker, these guys, they don't get it. Anyway, brief time out. We will continue with much more right after this. Don't go away. Yes, sir, Bob. Here we go back to the phones. La Crosse, Wisconsin. This is John. Great to have you, sir. I'm glad you were patient and waited. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rush. I'm glad to be on. the point I wanted to make is I've really been appalled all during the last weekend reading about Senator McCain and all this spite relating to his funeral arrangements. And, I mean, if he's really just that eaten up with anger over it, honestly, Rush, I think that at the funeral, someone should walk up just before they close the lid for the last time on Senator McCain. Someone should walk up and put in a copy of the Christopher Steele dossier just so it can be with Senator McCain for eternity.
Because this is obviously a reflection of the fact that Senator McCain was one of the leading political figures pushing the dossier. He actually sent a member of his staff over to the United Kingdom to get an early copy of it when he heard about it.
That's true, Rush, and I've never heard him apologize. I mean, despite all the facts that have come out since about how it wasn't true. And it just seems
wait a minute. Has anybody apologized? Has Mueller apologized? Has Comey apologized? Has Brennan apologized? Has stupid idiot Clapper apologized? Has Steele apologized? Has Hillary apologized? Has any of them apologized?
No, they haven't, Rush. But I think that a lot of people who are reasonable, even if they never apologize themselves, they should see just how unrepentant and just hardcore with rage these haters are.
I think in that crowd, these haters that you say are viewed as doing the Lord's work.
Oh, I'm sure, Rush. I think that they look at this as sort of like President Lincoln suspending the writ of habeas corpus. It's just a national emergency that Hillary lost, and they need to put people in jail if necessary to preserve.
Let me ask you, what do you mean? You made some reference to Mr. McCain's, what did you say, is this anger or his, what did you say, spite?
Well, I think both of those are true, Rush. I don't think there's any question about it.
Well, you know, Trump did say that he doesn't have much respect for military people who get captured. And McCain's life story is based on his being captured and remaining in the Hanoi Hilton.
Well, he didn't accuse him of treason, Rush, or being a foreign conspirator. I mean, come on, who's worse than this?
So you think it's a little strange that as McCain approaches the end of his life that these are the things on his mind?
I think that McCain is really angry that his side of the party seems to have lost the hold of the voters.
What did you make of his admission that choosing Sarah Palin was a mistake, that he really wanted Senator Lieberman?
Well, I read the excerpt, Rush, and I think it was pitched to him by his advisors that, well, we'll lose if you pick Lieberman. And looking back now at the last 8-10 years, I'm not sure that McCain really even cared that much about winning the general election. He did, after all, suspend his campaign 2 months before Election Day.
Well, that's because there was an economic crisis, fella, and we need to be treated seriously.
Well, and it seems to me that people like Senator McCain or Mitt Romney, their main goal in these elections is just to deny the nomination to someone like, for example, Trump or any of the other candidates like that, and then they can just go fishing for all they care. I don't think McCain was really in it to win in 2008.
I disagree.
Less favorite type
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. I know the point that you're making, that it was that you think they just wanted the next item on the resume. Nominated presidential candidate, Republican Party, 2008. But I think McCain did want to win. I just think he made some drastic misjudgments long before he even entered the primaries. But yeah, that's then, and he's dealing with the now. I am glad you called. I appreciate it. There's the ear-splitting tone. Have to take a break. Half my brain tied behind my back just to make it fair. We are very concerned with fairness here at the EIB Network. Let's head back to the audio soundbites. David Brooks, we're still here on the subject of the Democrats running on impeachment. Now remember, it was just 3 weeks ago that everybody in the media and all of the establishment types were talking about this big Democrat blue wave. It was going to sweep the Republicans out of office. It was going to stop Trump in his tracks. It was going to paralyze him. He wouldn't be able to get anything done. And then if the Democrats won the House, they were going to impeach Trump and finally get rid of the guy. And now, 3 weeks later, the only Democrat voice still shouting for impeachment is the insane Maxine Waters. I mean, even pencil neck Schiff is warning against it now. David Brooks, who is famous for saying of Obama, when I saw the crease in his slacks, I knew he would be a great president. He is the faux conservative columnist, New York Times, faux conservative analyst on the PBS NewsHour, was in fact on the PBS NewsHour on Friday night. He had a fill-in anchor named John Yang. And he's talking to David Brooks about Rudy, saying that Trump reimbursed Michael Cohen for the Stormy Daniels payment, later saying he didn't really know all the details. The PBS guy said, look, I know that you think that perhaps we're getting a little carried away with his focus on Stormy Daniels and payments and all this sort of thing. What do you mean we're getting carried away by it?
When you think about the important things that have happened this week, probably the China-U.S. trade talks were a very big deal. The North Korea-South Korea thing is promising all of a sudden. The economy is going great. And so apparently a lot of people have made the calculation, he's got always a bunch of scandal that those people in Washington care about. But when you think about the big substantive things seem to be going fine. I think that the threat to our norms is serious and just poisonous to our country. But other people have said, no, I just care about the substance. And this week, at least, the substance is pretty good. Those of us who are critical of Donald Trump can't hide from the facts that go against our story.
Whoa! Whoa. Those of us who are critical of Donald Trump cannot hide from the facts that go against our story. So Brooks has come to the conclusion, quote unquote, that Trump is achieving good results as a reprobate president and that that's all people care about. And the Stormy Daniels stuff and all the rest of it isn't going to matter at the end of the day. Now, he says that with a tinge of regret because he's right. It isn't going to matter. And let me tell you who we have to thank for that. Now, you can disagree with me all you want, but we cannot deny that Bill Clinton's a great icebreaker on this stuff. I mean, it happened. It happened, and Clinton's approval numbers, do you remember they stayed between 55 and 60? And I'll tell you, I was dumbfounded at that point. I could not understand why they were at 55 and 60. It didn't make any sense to me. I mean, his approval numbers during the Lewinsky scandal, toward the middle and the end of it, were higher than any other time in his presidency. And I think it was primarily due to the fact that there wasn't anything perceived to be really wrong in the country. And the American people didn't want to upset anything. Most Americans are not dyed-in-the-wool ideologues. And so there was a natural tendency to be reflectively protective. And remember the way the media was portraying Ken Starr. He was a space alien from Mars who was a sex pervert and on the side was selling cigarettes to kids. And they had great success with tarring and feathering Ken Starr. So Brooks remembers this. I'm sure. Here's John Meacham, used to be at Newsweek. He was on Meet the Press on Sunday morning during the panel discussion about Trump being called a liar about the Stormy Daniels payments.
It took 4 years to get McCarthy. It took 3 years to get Andrew Johnson. It's a dark moment. I do know this historically, and I think we all know it intuitively. The presidents who get in trouble in the fullness of time are those who think they can put a fast one past the people. And I think this will have a cumulative effect.
So he's telling people, be patient. Look at me. It may take 3 or 4 years to get this guy. But we're going to get this guy because Trump's one of these guys who thinks he can pull a fast one on people. I don't think they have the slightest idea that Trump's people are not fooled by anything. Quite the contrary. You know, I shouldn't really say this. There's a part of me, I'll be honest, but there's a part of me, Selena Zito, forgive me here. There's a part of me does not want the left reading her book. There's a part of me that wants them to continue to be ignorantly arrogant about the Trump electorate. But then I comfort myself and I say, they are so arrogant they could read it 10 times and it's not going to change their minds. They're just going to think Selena Zito is an idiot. They're not going to take the time to learn who, what, where, when, why about the Trump voters because Trump voters repulse them. The Trump voters infuriate them. They don't want to learn about them. They don't want to learn how to reach them. They don't want their votes. They cast them aside officially in November of 2011. Speaking of Selena Zito, here she is. CNN this morning, Poppy Harlow is the info babe that's interviewing her. Question, look at the cover of the Daily News today. It's Wrong Again Rudy, talking about that Giuliani said the president doesn't have to comply with the subpoena, which is false. He dropped the bomb. The president may plead the fifth. Is this helping Trump, Ms. Zito, in any way?
I think that what's happening in terms of his voters, okay, let's just think about them for a minute. I think that they've made this decision to wait and see what happens when the probe is over in terms of whether they're going to move or not away from him. I just think that they're waiting to see what the end result is. I think they've made the decision, look, if this turns out to be that there's a problem, he's a bad guy, then we're going to deal with this populist moment. He was a result of it, but he wasn't the cause of it. It's more about them. So it's not always just about him.
They can't accept that. They believe Trump, just like every successful conservative. They believed it of me. When this program first started, you people were idiots. Remember, you were mind-numbed robots. I was some Svengali or Pied Piper. And you didn't know what to think, and you didn't know what to say. You didn't know how to vote until I told you. And to this day, that is how the left characterizes every prominent conservative or Republican. They're doing it with Trump. Trump is some wily populist nationalist who's got people wrapped around his little finger. And they're so stupid they don't see that Trump's a blowhard and a phony and a liar. They haven't the slightest idea. They do not credit people like you with the ability to make up your own mind. And the funny thing about this is it is their voters. It's like Kanye West has been talking about. It's their voters who are mental slaves. It is their voters who do not critically think. It is their voters who are basically just sponges, but mind-numbed robots. They own them on the left. Sanctuary cities for gun owners. Illinois is trying it. I love this. They're using the same language that sanctuary cities use for illegal aliens and immigrants, only they're doing it for gun owners. 5 different places in Illinois. Ramming it down the left's throat. Details on this we'll have to get to tomorrow because I got to get back to the phones. Cameron in St. Louis. Great to have you, sir.
Thank you, Russ. The pleasure's all mine. So changing gears a little bit from previous conversation today, there's a big Senate race, as you know, going on in West Virginia.
Right.
It's a real chance for the Republicans to flip a seat from Senator Joe Manchin. Lots of sites have it listed as a toss-up, and the primary is tomorrow, and it's really, really close. And this morning, President Trump tweeted to stay away from Don Blankenship because of his past deeds and just because he's essentially seems to be unelectable. And
this is the guy that's calling Mitch McConnell Cocaine Mitch, right?
Cocaine Mitch, yes. He dubbed him that. He got 4 Pinocchios on the Washington Post, things like that. So he doesn't seem to be an electable guy. So President Trump, what he did was tweeted to his support for 2 people. He said, don't vote for Don Blankenship. You should vote for either Congressman Evan Jenkins or Attorney General Patrick Morrisey. So that concerns me a little bit because he's endorsing 2 people. My thought is, what happens when that vote, if that
well,
vote...
but it's a primary. See, he cannot endorse... Believe me, it's problematic to endorse one over another in a primary here. It's just because he doesn't want, one of them may win. He doesn't want the guy mad at him. He doesn't. So he's asking people to avoid Blankenship. Whatever he said, remember Alabama. The Clarion called, remember Roy, what's his face? Yeah, Roy Moore. Don't want the same thing to happen. I understand him now. You think if he endorsed one of those guys, then one of those guys have a better chance of winning, and that way cut into the whatever damage Blankenship's going to do. You may have a point, but I don't see how he can endorse one of these two guys. So he's trying to endorse both of them. We'll see what happens. The fact that Blankenship is attracting a crowd is its own interesting talking point to me. But no time to do that today. A guy in Wisconsin has eaten his 30,000th Big Mac. 30,000 Big Macs over 46 years. Now look at this as a science experiment. A guy tried to give himself heart disease and failed. And you could turn this around. You could say that we could conclude that eating one Big Mac a day will prevent heart disease for 46 years. You think the environmentalist wackos and the food Nazis would sign up for that?